The meeting hall of the Karani embassy gleamed with polished stone and translucent, curved walls that refracted the violet light of Thria Five's twin suns. Commander Alex Reyes adjusted his formal jacket and stepped into the room, followed by his deputy, Lieutenant Dan Carter. Dan, a stocky man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and a quick wit, had served under Alex during their time in the Navy. Now he was Alex's right-hand man in the delicate world of interstellar diplomacy. The Karani delegation stood as still as statues, their silver skin seeming to shimmer as they turned to face the humans. At the center was Tlysa, the leader of the Karani delegation, whose violet eyes fixed on Alex with the piercing intensity of someone trying to see into his thoughts. "Commander Reyes," she said, her voice resonant and calm, "you honor us with your presence." "Representative Tlysa," Alex replied, inclining his head slightly, "we come here not just as representatives of Earth, but as partners seeking understanding." Dan, standing just behind Alex, leaned in and muttered under his breath, "Smooth, always the charmer." "Let's keep it professional, Dan," Alex replied softly, though his lips twitched into a faint smile. The meeting began in earnest. Tlysa and her advisors laid out their proposals for trade agreements and cultural exchanges, while Alex and Dan countered with Earth's own priorities. The negotiations were cordial, but the atmosphere remained formal, almost stiff. Alex tried to read Tlysia's expressions. Her composed exterior revealed little, but there was a hint of curiosity in her gaze that she couldn't entirely hide. After several hours of careful discussion, Tlysa suggested a recess. "Our minds work best when we allow time to reflect," she said, gesturing toward a curved corridor that led out to a garden-like atrium. "Good idea," Alex said, standing. "Dan, come on. Let's stretch our legs." The two men followed the Karani delegation out into the atrium. The space was a marvel of alien landscaping, with bioluminescent plants casting a soft glow over smooth stone paths. A cool breeze flowed through, carrying the faint scent of something like mint mixed with citrus. Dan inhaled deeply and whistled low. "Man, they've got a nice setup here. Almost makes me forget how much I hate these formal shindigs." Alex chuckled. "You hate anything that requires a dress code." "True," Dan said, grinning. "But hey, at least I don't have to do all the talking. I'll leave the diplomatic smooth talk to you." Alex smirked, then noticed Tlysa standing apart from her group, her cloak held tightly around her shoulders. She seemed lost in thought, her usually upright posture slightly slumped. For a moment, she looked less like a formidable diplomat and more like someone carrying a heavy burden. Alex nudged Dan. "I'm going to see if she's all right. You keep an eye on the others." Dan raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" "She's not exactly the chattiest person." "I'll manage," Alex said, stepping toward Tlysa. When he approached, she glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Representative Tlysa," he said, "is everything okay?" She hesitated before answering, her voice softer than before. "It is colder here than I anticipated." Alex noted the slight shiver in her frame. Without thinking, he slipped off his jacket and held it out to her. "Here. This should help." Tlysa stared at the jacket for a long moment as though she didn't know what to make of it. Slowly, she reached out and took it, her four-fingered hand brushing against his. "You are offering this without expectation?" "It's just a jacket," Alex said with a shrug. "Think of it as a gesture of goodwill." She tilted her head, studying him. "Among my people, such gestures are rare. It is not our way to offer without an agreement in return." "Well," Alex said, smiling faintly, "welcome to the human way." Tlysa's lips curved ever so slightly, a hint of a smile. "Thank you, Commander." As she wrapped the jacket around herself, Alex noticed something shift in her demeanor. She stood a little straighter, her shoulders relaxing. The small act of kindness seemed to have reached her in a way that hours of formal negotiation had not. Dan wandered over, hands in his pockets. "Everything good here?" "Fine," Alex said, glancing at Tlysa. "Just a little cold, that's all." Dan raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Instead, he turned to Tlysa and offered a lopsided grin. "You know, Commander Reyes here has a knack for these kinds of gestures. Don't let it go to his head, though." Tlysa regarded Dan with a curious expression as though trying to understand his humor. "I will bear that in mind," she said. Dan's grin widened. "I like her." Alex sighed. "Let's not push our luck." As the break came to an end and the negotiations resumed, Alex couldn't help but notice that Tlysa seemed more engaged. She asked more questions, her tone less formal. There was a subtle yet unmistakable shift in the room's atmosphere, one that Alex felt was at least partly due to the brief, unspoken connection they had shared. When the day's talks concluded, the humans and Karani filed out, the mood noticeably lighter than it had been that morning. Alex and Dan walked together back toward their quarters, the glow of Sci-Fi's setting suns casting long shadows on the polished floor. "You've got away with people, you know that?" Dan said. "Even aliens who don't understand half our customs." Alex shook his head. "It wasn't a calculated move, Dan. She looked cold, so I gave her a jacket." "Yeah, well, sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference." "Let's not start writing inspirational posters just yet," Alex replied, though he couldn't deny the truth in Dan's words. Sometimes a small act of kindness could open doors that diplomacy alone could not. As they reached their quarters, Alex glanced back toward the meeting hall. The image of Tlysa standing there, wrapped in his jacket, stayed with him. It wasn't just that he had helped her, it was the way she had responded, the hint of vulnerability she had shown. In that moment, he felt they had taken the first step towards something that went beyond treaties and agreements. "Think she'll wear it tomorrow?" Dan asked as he keyed open the door. Alex smiled faintly. "Guess we'll see." Inside, the two men sat down to review their notes for the next day's session. But even as they planned their strategy, Alex couldn't shake the memory of Tlysa's grateful expression. It was a small thing, he reminded himself. Just a jacket. Yet it felt like the start of something far more significant than he could have imagined. The following morning, Alex Reyes and Dan Carter arrived at the meeting hall early. The first day's discussions had gone well enough, but Alex wanted to capitalize on the momentum. He stood with his arms crossed, glancing out at the atrium as the pale light of Sci-Fi's twin suns filtered through the embassy's curved walls. Dan, on the other hand, leaned against a pillar, sipping from a mug of Earth-imported coffee. "So, what's the plan today?" Dan asked. "More of the same, nod, smile, try not to offend anybody?" "More or less," Alex said with a faint grin. "But we're making progress." Tlysa seemed more receptive after the break. Dan raised an eyebrow. "Because you gave her a jacket?" "I don't get it." "It's not just about the jacket," Alex replied, turning to face his deputy. "It's about trust. Small gestures matter. They help bridge the gap between our cultures." "Sure," Dan said, taking another sip of his coffee. "But I'm not exactly the small gestures type. You're the diplomat. I'm just here to back you up." Alex clapped him on the shoulder. "And that's exactly what I need. Besides, you're good at reading people." "People, maybe," Dan said. "Aliens? Still getting used to that." Before Alex could respond, the doors to the meeting hall slid open and the Karani delegation entered. Tlysa, still wearing Alex's jacket, led the group. Her violet eyes scanned the room before settling on Alex. She approached him directly, her stride purposeful yet graceful. "Commander Reyes," she said in her calm, measured tone. "You arrive early." "Just eager to continue our discussions," Alex replied, inclining his head. "And you?" "I find myself curious," Tlysa admitted. "Yesterday's exchange has given me much to consider." Dan leaned in and whispered to Alex, "Is it just me, or does she seem less intimidating today?" "She does," Alex murmured back, then turned his attention fully to Tlysa. "We're glad to hear that. Let's get started." The group took their seats around the polished stone table and the day's negotiations began. As before, the topics ranged from trade agreements to cultural exchanges. But this time, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Tlysa and her advisors asked more questions, showing a genuine interest in Earth's customs and practices. In turn, Alex shared stories and insights that went beyond the standard diplomatic script. During a brief recess, Dan struck up a conversation with one of the Karani advisors, a younger delegate named Vlen. The two quickly found common ground in their shared background as military officers, Vlen having served in the Karani Defense Corps before joining the diplomatic team. "You were a pilot?" Dan asked, genuinely interested. "I was," Vlen confirmed. "I flew reconnaissance missions along our outer borders. It was a challenging assignment, but rewarding." Dan nodded. "I was in the Navy before I got roped into this gig. Different theater, same kind of thrill. Ever miss it?" Vlen's silver skin seemed to shift hues as he considered the question. "Sometimes. There is a clarity in flying and immediacy of purpose. Diplomacy is more complex." "Tell me about it," Dan said with a wry grin. "But it's got its perks. I mean, look at this place. Beats a tin can in the middle of the ocean." Vlen's lips curved slightly. "You make a valid point." Meanwhile, Alex found himself walking through the atrium with Tlysa. The conversation turned personal, not too deep, but enough for Alex to feel they were beginning to understand each other. "Your jacket has proven most useful," Tlysa said, glancing down at the garment. "It is well-crafted. Durable. Earth textiles have come a long way," Alex said. "I'm glad it's keeping you warm." She stopped walking and looked at him, her expression unusually open. "It is not just the warmth, Commander. Your gesture, it is unfamiliar to me. Among my people, such kindness is not often shown without expectation." Alex held her gaze, sensing the weight behind her words. "Tlysa, I didn't do it expecting anything in return. That's just how I was raised." She studied him for a moment before nodding slowly. "It is admirable." Their conversation was interrupted by the chiming tone that signaled the resumption of talks. They returned to the meeting hall, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen a different side of Tlysa, a more human side, if such a term could even apply. The negotiations continued well into the afternoon, and by the time they adjourned for the day, both sides had made significant progress. As the Karani delegation filed out, Tlysa lingered near the entrance. Alex caught her eye, and she gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod before departing. Back in their quarters, Dan tossed his jacket onto a chair and collapsed onto the couch. "Long day," he said, stretching his legs out. "But I think we're getting somewhere." "We are," Alex agreed, sitting down across from him. "Tlysa is opening up. Her whole team seems more willing to engage." "Maybe it's because you're actually listening," Dan said. "Most diplomats just talk. You're different." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "You care," Dan said simply. "You're not just here to check a box or sign a treaty. You actually want to understand them." Alex didn't reply right away. Instead, he leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "You know, this isn't just about the treaty. If we can build real relationships, real understanding, maybe we can avoid the mistakes of the past." Dan nodded. "Yeah, and maybe one day I won't have to pack a dress uniform for trips like this." Alex chuckled. "One can hope." The two men sat in companionable silence for a while, the weight of the day's discussions slowly fading. The mission was far from over, but for the first time, Alex felt they were truly moving in the right direction. As the third day of negotiations began, Alex and Dan arrived at the meeting hall feeling cautiously optimistic. The previous day had been fruitful, and the Karani delegation seemed more willing to engage in meaningful dialogue. Dan, who had started as little more than a silent observer, was now finding his own rhythm in the discussions. His straightforward nature and military background provided a relatable counterpoint to Alex's polished diplomatic style. Together, they were starting to feel like a team that could handle anything the Karani threw at them. "Morning," Dan said as they stepped into the atrium carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed one to Alex. "Think they'll be on time today?" "Probably not," Alex replied. "Punctuality doesn't seem to be their thing." Dan took a sip and grinned. "Guess that gives us a few minutes to figure out what the hell we're doing." "We know what we're doing," Alex said, though his tone was light. "We're building a relationship. That's all diplomacy really is." "Easy for you to say, Mr. Smooth Talk," Dan said, nudging Alex's arm. "You're good at that whole relationship thing." "Come on, Dan," Alex said, shaking his head. "I just treat people like people. It's not some grand strategy." "Sure," Dan said. "But you've got the touch. You actually get through to them." Before Alex could respond, the doors to the meeting hall opened and the Karani delegation entered. Tlysa was at the forefront, as usual. The jacket Alex had given her still draped over her shoulders, and it struck him how natural it looked on her now, almost like it belonged there. Her violet eyes swept the room, landing on Alex. She offered a small nod, and he returned the gesture. Dan leaned in and whispered, "She seems friendlier today." "Yeah," Alex whispered back. "Let's see if that holds once we start talking about trade tariffs again." They took their seats, and the discussions resumed. The day's agenda included finalizing terms for mutual technological assistance. The Karani were willing to share their advanced energy conversion techniques in exchange for Earth's agricultural innovations. It was a promising start, but the details were proving tricky to hammer out. Tlysa and her advisors debated every point with measured precision, forcing Alex and Dan to stay on their toes. During a break in the talks, Alex found himself alone with Tlysa near one of the atrium's large, crystalline windows. The violet glow of the Sci-Fi sky bathed the room in an almost dreamlike hue. Tlysa seemed more relaxed than he'd ever seen her, her posture less formal, her expression thoughtful. "You've been unusually quiet today," Alex said, breaking the silence. Tlysa turned her head, her violet eyes meeting his. "I have been listening, observing." "Anything interesting?" he asked. leaning casually against the window frame. "You and your colleague," she said after a moment. "You work well together." Alex smiled. "Dan's the best. Couldn't ask for a better partner in all this." Tlysa tilted her head slightly. "He is unorthodox. His humor, his mannerisms, they are very different from what I have encountered before." "He's a character, that's for sure," Alex said. "But he's also honest. Straightforward. I think that's why you and your team have warmed up to him." "You are correct," Tlysa said, her tone thoughtful. "He lacks pretense. It is refreshing." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the distant suns began to dip lower in the sky. Then Tlysa spoke again, her voice quieter. "Yesterday, during our break, I overheard him speaking to Fklen. He spoke of his time as a sailor." "Yeah," Alex said. "Dan served in the Navy. He's got a lot of great stories. Some more colorful than I can repeat in polite company." Tlysa gave the faintest hint of a smile. Fklen was impressed. He said that humans have a way of adapting to challenges with determination. Alex laughed softly. "That's Dan for you. Stubborn as hell. But it's not just him. We're all like that in our own way." Tlysa regarded him carefully. "I have seen this in you as well, Commander Reyes. You do not back down, even when the discussions become difficult. It is intriguing." Alex rubbed the back of his neck, feeling a bit self-conscious under her gaze. "Well, I've had some practice. And honestly, it helps to have someone like Dan backing me up." She nodded slowly, as if considering his words carefully. "Perhaps that is the key to your success. You do not act alone. You rely on those around you." "Yeah," Alex said. "We're stronger together." The chiming sound that signaled the end of the break interrupted them. Tlysa straightened, her composure returning. "I believe it is time to continue." "Right?" Alex said, following her back to the meeting hall. As they rejoined their respective delegations, he glanced at Dan, who gave him a quick thumbs up. Alex returned the gesture, feeling a small spark of optimism. The negotiations went on well into the evening, with both sides working through the details of their agreement. By the time they wrapped up for the day, the outlines of a deal were finally starting to take shape. Alex and Dan returned to their quarters exhausted but satisfied. "Not bad," Dan said, tossing his jacket onto the couch. "We might actually pull this off." "Yeah," Alex said, sitting down and stretching his legs. "It's starting to feel like we're getting somewhere." Dan grabbed 2 bottles of water from the small fridge and handed one to Alex. "I have to admit, I didn't think we'd make this much progress." "You've got a way with people, Alex. Even Tlysa seems to respect you now." "It's not just me," Alex said, taking a sip of water. "It's us. You're a big part of why they're warming up to us." Dan raised an eyebrow. "Me? Come on, I'm just the sidekick." "Don't sell yourself short," Alex said. "Tlysa and Fklen see that we're a team, that we've got each other's backs. It makes us stronger, more credible." Dan grinned. "All right, I'll take the compliment. But don't think this means I'm doing more talking tomorrow." Alex chuckled. "Deal." As they sat there, the glow of the alien city visible through their window, Alex reflected on how far they'd come in just a few days. The Karani were still a mystery in many ways, but they were no longer just distant figures at a negotiating table. They were people, or close enough, to build a connection with. And that, Alex thought, was the real victory. Dan raised his water bottle. "To progress." "To progress," Alex agreed, clinking his bottle against Dan's. They drank in silence, the faint hum of the embassy's energy systems the only sound. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time, Alex felt they were truly moving in the right direction. The final day of negotiations had arrived, and the mood in the embassy was tense yet hopeful. The outlines of the trade agreement had been largely settled, but a few key points still hung in the balance. As Alex and Dan approached the meeting hall, Dan turned to Alex, his tone unusually. "Eck of alien food." Alex smirked. "It's not that bad." "Not bad? I had no idea you could miss pizza this much," Dan grumbled. "Let's focus on the task at hand," Alex said, though he couldn't help but chuckle. "We can celebrate with as much pizza as you want once we wrap this up." The doors slid open, and the Karani delegation entered, led by Tlysa. She had foregone the cloak she'd worn on previous days and now wore Alex's jacket like it was part of her official attire. Alex noticed it immediately but chose not to comment, though the sight brought a faint smile to his lips. As they sat down, Tlysa addressed the room. Today we finalize our agreement. Let us proceed efficiently and with clarity. Agreed, Alex said, nodding. We've made great progress so far. I think we can bring this home. The discussions began, and for hours they pored over the remaining details, trade routes, technology sharing schedules, and the logistics of cross-cultural exchanges. Dan, who had been quiet for most of the week, jumped in more than once, clarifying points and even cracking a few jokes that earned muted but genuine reactions from the Karani delegation. Alex watched him with a mixture of amusement and admiration. Dan might not have been a trained diplomat, but he had a knack for cutting through tension. As the afternoon wore on, the final sticking point emerged: intellectual property rights. The Karani were protective of their advanced energy conversion methods, while Earth's delegation insisted on equal access to key agricultural technologies. The debate grew heated, with both sides making impassioned arguments. Dan leaned toward Alex. "You've got that look," he muttered. "What's on your mind?" Alex tapped a finger on the table, considering his next words carefully. "We need to frame this differently. They're not going to budge if they feel like they're giving something away." Dan's eyes lit up. "What if we present it as a co-development initiative? Joint research teams, shared facilities. Make it feel like a collaboration rather than a trade." Alex nodded slowly. "That could work. Tlysa values partnership. If we emphasize mutual benefits, she might be more willing to compromise." Alex raised his hand slightly to indicate he wanted the floor. When the room quieted, he spoke. "Representative Tlysa, may I propose a different approach? Instead of simply trading these technologies, we create joint research initiatives. Both sides would contribute their expertise and share the results. It wouldn't be a matter of giving or taking. It would be true collaboration." Tlysa's violet eyes narrowed thoughtfully. She turned to her advisors, who murmured among themselves. After a moment, she looked back at Alex. "This proposal, it is unconventional, but it may have merit. Explain further." Encouraged, Alex outlined the idea in more detail, with Dan chiming in to clarify technical aspects and highlight potential benefits. The discussion became more constructive, the room's tension easing as both sides found common ground. By the end of the session, they had reached a preliminary agreement. Tlysa leaned back in her chair, a faint smile touching her lips. "Commander Reyes, Lieutenant Carter, your proposal demonstrates creative thinking. I believe we can proceed on these terms." Dan exhaled in relief. "Finally. I was starting to think we'd never get there." Alex shot him a warning glance, but Tlysa chuckled softly. "Your honesty is refreshing, Lieutenant Carter." Dan raised an eyebrow at Alex, as if to say, "See? She likes me." Alex ignored him, focusing on Tlysa. "Thank you, Representative. I believe we've accomplished something meaningful here." After a short recess, the delegations reconvened for the ceremonial signing of the agreement. As the representatives exchanged signatures and formal handshakes, Dan leaned over to Alex. "So, we did it. What now?" "Now," Alex said, "we start building on what we've agreed. The real work begins." Dan nodded, then grinned. "Still think this calls for some pizza when we get back." Alex laughed. "I'll hold you to that." The ceremony concluded and the delegations began to disperse. Tlysa approached Alex and Dan, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "Commander Reyes, Lieutenant Carter," she said. "Your contributions were invaluable. This agreement marks a significant step forward." Alex inclined his head. "We couldn't have done it without your willingness to engage." Tlysa hesitated, then added, "Your methods, particularly your partnership, are uncommon among my people. I have learned much from observing you both." Dan smirked. "See, Alex? Told you we make a good team." Tlysa's lips curved faintly. "Indeed, you do. I hope that this collaboration will inspire further understanding between our peoples." Alex extended his hand. "I believe it will." She took his hand, her grip firm yet warm. As their eyes met, Alex felt a sense of accomplishment not just from the agreement itself, but from the personal connections that had been forged over the past few days. Dan clapped Alex on the shoulder. "All right, boss. Let's get back to the ship. I think I've earned a little downtime." "Yeah," Alex said, smiling. "I think we both have." As they turned to leave, Alex glanced back one last time. Tlysa stood near the window, watching them. She raised a hand in a gesture that was neither wave nor salute, but something uniquely Karani. Alex returned the gesture, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they had built. Stepping into the corridor with Dan, Alex felt a quiet satisfaction. The mission wasn't over, they still had plenty of work ahead, but they had achieved something significant. Together, they had not only secured an important agreement but also laid the groundwork for a lasting relationship between their worlds. The Karani delegation departed on the same day the agreement was signed, leaving Alex Reyes and Dan Carter to spend one last night on Sci-Fi before returning to their ship. Alex leaned on the balcony of their quarters, looking out over the alien city as the twin suns dipped low, casting the buildings in a soft violet glow. Dan walked out with 2 glasses of amber liquid, handing one to Alex. Figured we earned a little something to celebrate. Is this Karani whiskey? Alex asked, taking a sniff. Dan nodded, a smug grin on his face. Got it from one of Clen's aides. It's strong, so go easy. Alex took a sip, wincing at the burn but appreciating the complex flavor. Not bad. Reminds me of scotch, but with a strange aftertaste. It grows on you, Dan said, leaning against the railing beside him. You're not going to start getting nostalgic on me, are you? Alex raised an eyebrow. Nostalgic about what? About this whole thing, Dan said, gesturing toward the skyline. This mission. The Karani. The jacket. You and Tlysa having your little moments. Alex shook his head with a chuckle. You never stop, do you? Hey, I'm just saying. I saw the way she looked at you during that signing ceremony. And? Alex said, trying to sound neutral. And Dan said, turning to face him fully, you can't tell me there wasn't something there. I know that look. Alex sighed, taking another sip of the whiskey. It's complicated. Sure, Dan said, nodding sagely. Because she's Karani, because she's a diplomat, because this, because that. I get it. But come on, Alex, you've spent how long out here in the diplomatic corps? When was the last time you connected with someone like this? Alex stayed silent for a moment, watching as the lights of the city began to shimmer in the encroaching twilight. I'm not even sure what it would mean. For me. It's not like we can just date? Dan cut in. Who says you can't? She's the leader of her delegation, Dan. It's not like I can just ask her out for dinner and a movie. Dan rolled his eyes. Then figure out what works for her. You're good at that kind of thing. Alex gave him a look. I thought you didn't like all the diplomatic stuff. Dan shrugged. Hey, when it comes to romance, I'm all for diplomacy. All I'm saying is, if you think there's something there, don't let all the official crap get in the way. Life's too short. Alex turned back to the skyline, mulling over Dan's words. He knew his friend was right in his own blunt way. The connection he had felt with Tlysa during the negotiations wasn't something he could just ignore. But acting on it, if that was even possible, would be a whole new challenge. The next morning, Alex and Dan prepared to leave Sci-Fi. Their shuttle was ready to take them back to the orbiting Earth ship that had brought them to the Karani world. As they walked through the embassy's departure corridor, Tlysa appeared, flanked by 2 advisors. Commander Reyes, Lieutenant Carter, she said, her tone formal but her expression softer than usual. Before you depart, I wish to express my gratitude once more. Your approach has been enlightening. Alex stopped, standing a little straighter. The feeling's mutual, Representative Tlysa. Working with you and your delegation has been an honor. Tlysa stepped closer, her violet eyes fixed on Alex. I have learned much from this experience. From you. Dan stood slightly behind Alex, his face carefully neutral, though Alex could almost feel his amusement. I'm glad we could help each other, Alex said, keeping his voice steady. Tlysa hesitated for a moment, then extended her hand in a human-style handshake. When Alex took it, her fingers lingered slightly longer than expected. I hope we will have the opportunity to work together again, she said. Me too, Alex replied. Dan cleared his throat. We've got a shuttle waiting, Alex. Right, Alex said, reluctantly releasing her hand. We'll see you again, Tlysa. Tlysa inclined her head. Safe travels. As Alex and Dan walked toward the shuttle, Dan leaned in and muttered, smooth. Real smooth. Shut up, Dan, Alex said, though his tone was more amused than annoyed. Once they were aboard the shuttle and lifting off, Alex gazed out the window as Sci-Fi's surface receded. His mind was still on Tlysa, on her words, on the way she had looked at him as they said goodbye. He wondered if he would ever see her again and, if he did, what that meeting would look like. Dan, sitting beside him, broke the silence. So, what's the next move? For the treaty? Alex asked, knowing full well that wasn't what Dan meant. No, you know what I mean, Dan said, grinning. You and Tlysa. Alex sighed. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what happens. Dan clapped him on the shoulder. Don't wait too long, my friend. Opportunities like this don't come around every day. Alex didn't reply. He just stared out at the stars, thinking about the future, both for the alliance they had forged and for the connection he had felt with Tlysa. It was uncharted territory, but then again, so was everything else about humanity's place in the galaxy. Whatever happened next, Alex knew one thing: he wasn't facing it alone.